fairy tale. The emperor was surrounded by the henchmen who wanted the honors and power and the committee assignments and the seniority and the leadership. But who was it that really made the difference? It was that little boy in the street. It was the rookie. We need a whole freshman class of rookies back there who are going to coalition together. A coalition can be powerful. That's what I've done. And simply say, we are going to collectively stand up and we are going to speak for correct principles. Now, there are going to be those who are going to be concerned about how that will affect their re-election. That's not going to affect me because, as I say, my age, when we talk about term limits, my age comes with its own little built-in term limit. In this race, I must say, this is like the three bears. Too young, too old, just right. And so I'm not worried about the election. That's not my goal. I'm very sincere when I say I'm doing this for our children and grandchildren. Pardon me? I would probably seek for one extra term. 12 years ought to be long enough to do something. And that also gives time for, we only replace a third every election in the Senate. So that would give us time to replace two-thirds.
Probably have to wait for the other two-thirds to get kicked out.
So,
right.
but I have a real life and a family, and I'm not committed to living a Washington, D.C. lifestyle. I've been back there enough to know what it is. And it's not something that I see. So I guess you just have to trust that my life experience, the 30-plus years of activism that I've shown, I'm going to stay true to that. I would have no reason not to. I don't need the salary of a senator. I don't need the perks. My husband and I do fine. We're a small business. We're like you. We're struggling in this market. We didn't get a bailout.
You talk a lot about absolutes, and that there's no, you're not going to compromise, but yet you're also talking about that there are earmarks that you would support, such as like keeping Hill Air Force Base or the military, things like that. When I look back at how the Constitution was put together, it was all about compromise. It was a great compromise that even put the Constitution there. And so,
in which ways did it compromise?
Well, in the fact that you had the large states and the small states, and they were not coming upon agreement until it was finally, they said, okay, we're going to have two houses, one based on population and one that's portioned by state equally. And that great compromise is what really allowed us to have the Constitution. So now, my concern is that if you are faced with a bill that is about to wipe out something of Utah, and the only way that you're going to keep that is to compromise on something else, how are you going to vote?
Well, let's go back to the compromise that our founders made. The compromise that our founders made was surrounding correct principles. And we came up with just the right balance of power. And I don't consider that a compromise as much as going through the discussion and the deliberation in a very common sense and wise way to come up with the best ideas. So that's different from compromising on principle and value and things that would sell out our nation's best interest. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's how I see it. So as far as will I compromise on another bill because I want something for this particular bill, I can't say that as a hypothetical because I would have to know what it is. I would have to know am I compromising on a principle on another bill that's in direct conflict with this? Certainly we have these dilemmas in mind. Let me just share with you something in the Constitution that I'm often told, and I believe that this is in a speech also, or maybe it's the book that Rex Lee wrote. And by the way, my brother knew Rex very well. He was the development director for BYU for 20 years. And we highly regard him and his knowledge, and I don't always agree with him in some of his political views, but and he's also married. No, my brother-in-law is his cousin, so you kind of bump into yourself in Utah, no. But I'm just prefacing this with this. I read something that Wesley wrote about the Great Compromise in our Constitution and how it was written. And I do disagree with him on one point, because he said that there were some things in the Constitution that were not moral, because it kept slavery intact. But if you go in context and you review what actually was happening, that's not exactly what happened. Here's what happened, and it wasn't a compromise. It wasn't a compromise that was unprincipled. You could call it maybe a compromise, but it wasn't unprincipled. It was founded on correct values and some wisdom. If you read Article 5 in the Constitution, it talks about the year 1808 being the year that the South would have to terminate the sale of slaves. That was 20 years from when the Constitution was ratified. I believe that our founders did the right thing by making that kind of a compromise. If they had completely obliterated slavery at that juncture, this nation would never have come to be. There would have been terrible war, and the South would have collapsed over that sudden economic change. Does this make sense? Our founders gave the South 20 years to make that adjustment to their economy. And because they did not, we reap the consequences. And that will always happen when you don't follow correct principles. You will reap the consequences.
So can I follow that up with then?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say the bill at hand is to allow free trade or to keep the jobs at Hill Air Force Base. What are you going to do?
If it's between free trade and Hill Air Force Base, well, it's already happening, because we're undercutting our own Boeing aircraft with Airbus and with Brazilian aircraft. And I can say to that we have to make that adjustment so that we're not undercutting our own airline industry. And that are making the planes and the aircraft not just for commercial, but for military. As long as we keep allowing foreign nations to undercut us, we're going to be affecting what happens to Hill Air Force Base. So it's all combined together. So I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. If you would want me...
Well, okay, for example, if you can buy parts on the world market for much less, and by doing that, you can allow the funding for all the jobs and, for more jobs in the military, would you not allow that?
I don't think that's an either or. I think that we can come from the budget in other ways and do the very same thing. So, again, we have to look at what's happening in our nation and decide, do we want to outsource? Do we want to? For example, I disagree with my opponents that we ought to be allowing U.S. corporations to build nuclear power plants in communist China. I think that we're giving our technology to them. Do we not want to protect our children when they're going out in the middle of the street and ready to get run over? Do we not want to protect our economy, our jobs, and our future, our liberty, this nation? We have to make some principled decisions on what we're going to do about that. Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. He didn't even show up to the Constitutional Convention. He was so worried that it was going to become a central government. So he's the one that we can credit, along with others, for the Bill of Rights to protect our state sovereignty. They believed that our nation needed to protect itself and its trade policy to become a great nation in the world. And every president, until I think it started being like John Eisenhower and others, started moving away from that kind of policy. Our tax policy, income tax, our founders thought that that was immoral. It was a direct confiscation of private property. So what do? I do not believe that an income tax is the best form of taxation. I believe that's part of the problem we're facing today. We have to work 4 to 6 months a year to keep our hard-earned dollars. Where did this come from? Woodrow Wilson. Read